Welcome to another episode of the Looking After Nature podcast, where we hope to bring you closer to nature and wildlife in Hampshire. My name is Andy Davidson, and I'm here once again with my co-host Carly Harrod. Hi Carly.
Hi Andy, and what a lovely day it is today.
It's actually one of the first, you can actually feel the warmth of the sun.
You definitely can, and It's making me feel so much like spring at the moment. Where are we today, Andy?
We're actually on the downs on the edge of the Meon Valley. We're not at a National Nature Reserve or anything like that, but that doesn't mean anything. We can still find some good stuff local to people around here. Definitely.
And why have we come here today?
We come to talk to Jo. Now, people might have heard her in some of our other podcasts that we've done, our mindfulness ones, but so we come to talk to her and talk about the countryside around where she lives. Hi Jo, good to see you.
Hi Andy, nice to see you too, nice to be out today.
And it's nice to get out, and it's actually quite a lovely day today, isn't it?
It is. It is. The sun's trying to come through. Yeah,
there was a sun, and there was actually genuine warmth in the sun as well, wasn't there?
Showing that signs of spring are coming.
Absolutely, and that's what we're concentrating on today. You work with the countryside, but you were the head of service, assistant director, so you're very much involved in the countryside service, aren't you?
I am. So yes, my role is Assistant Director, Natural Environment and Recreation, and that includes having responsibility for the Countryside Service along with Sir Harold Hillier Gardens, the rural estate, so all our county farms, and also the outdoor centres as well.
But you clearly didn't start out as Assistant Director. You've been in the Countryside Service and that related field for quite a while, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been Countryside Service and Hampshire County Council for 20 years, thereabouts, just over actually 20 years, so yeah, quite a long time. When I joined, I was actually funded by Natural England to do a sort of pathfinder project for the government and hosted by Hampshire County Council all those years ago.
So you're very much, you live in the countryside, and clearly the countryside is very important to you, I know.
Incredibly important, yeah. I guess I was thinking, when I was younger, it was part of my being free. It was a way of being free and being allowed to be away from my family and the built environment, if you like. And getting out meant that I could do all sorts of activities. So I was walking, cycling, horse riding. I did all that, and I think because the countryside offered me so much opportunity, I sort of grew an appreciation really for it and started to really look a bit more around me about what actually the countryside was made up of, and those really important nature and habitats and the wildlife that we enjoy today. Yeah.
And people might have heard you on some of your mindfulness podcasts that you do as well. So clearly the health and well-being benefits are very much of what you're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. So along with the sort of physical benefits of getting out and being active in the countryside, you've also got that connection with nature and the ability to get away from the screen, the fact that it's very uncluttered and very simple. All you really need is a coat and a pair of boots and you can just, spend a whole day outside.
And we've just walked down the road from where you live and we found a little footpath. So it's not a National Nature Reserve or a Triple SI we're going to. This is the normal countryside around you where you live as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And on the way down, during the spring, you see the sort of beautiful sunny petals of the lesser celandine coming through, and the violets on the side of the road of the lane as you come down and join the footpath.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people during lockdown, particularly because they weren't able to travel very far, have discovered their local environment, and that's very much what we're looking at today. Actually, we're going to have a walk down the path up to, I think there's a bit of wood over there, and just see what we can see.
Yeah, for sure. We've really seen an explosion in the use of the countryside over the last year. And it's great that we've got such a huge rights-of-way network in the county that means that people can get out really close to where they live and get some time outside and enjoying our beautiful countryside.
Yeah, so let's do that. So I've just seen a few fieldfare and redwing coming out of the field here. So do you know those birds?
I do. I have heard them, but I'm not. I have to say I'm not particularly good at telling them apart because they tend to flock together?
Quite often seen together. They're some of what we call winter thrushes, because there's a very small number of some of them breed in Scotland, very small, but most come down from Scandinavia and Iceland for the winter. Okay. So the fieldfare is actually slightly bigger than the blackbird, but it's got a very dark tail and a grey rump. And it's got spots like you could imagine a thrush has on its breast, but it's also got this almost like a nicotine stain colour underneath, like an orangey buff colour. But they're quite large, and their call is chuck, 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 chuck. I'll do impressions as we go around. There we go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's quite a few coming out there. They are very big thrushes.
And then quite big flocks, because I think I've heard that noise, there's quite a lot of them together.
Yeah, absolutely. They can form good big flocks. I think there's less around this year than normal, but certainly there are some biggish flocks you can get. And they love these sort of fields or wet meadows, but they should. So, talking about signs of springs, one of the signs of spring is them leaving, clearly. And the redwing, which comes along with them, they're very much smaller, they're about a song thrush size. Okay. And they've got a white stripe above the eye. And they're called redwings because underneath, imagine, not the armpit, wing pit, what are we calling it? Is a red patch of feathers.
Right.
And their flight call is a seep, a high-pitched seep. If they're sitting around in the trees, they just do a little chuck, chuck noise.
And do they come into gardens at all? I think I've seen them in the garden because obviously we're close to home.
Yeah.
And I think we had, during a particularly snowy patch a couple of years ago, we had them in the garden feeding on some of the berries that were there. Would that be right?
Absolutely. Snow does tend to drive them a bit more into gardens because there's more food. Depends on what your garden's like. If you've got a mini apple orchard or something like that, then they'll come in for the fruit.
Yeah, we do have a few apple trees, yeah.
Yeah, so they're lovely, but to say they should be, so we're just coming into February now, so they should be starting to go next month really. But they're a lovely bird, and I think partly you do sort of several people recently where they're sort of almost wishing away the winter because we've had enough of it by now, But I think part of it is doing things like getting out and seeing some of the life that's there. It's not a dead zone winter, it's other life is around really, and it's seeing it, which probably I hope to see some more today.
I think, that's one of the things that's really special for me about the countryside is that it's always changing, it's constantly changing. And it reminds us that whatever is going on for us at the time, that things will change. It doesn't last forever. So good or bad, life is sort of impermanent, and what goes on in life is impermanent. And that's a part of that mindfulness is about not being too attached to things, to being more in the present moment and recognising that things change, and that's fine too. And so, like you say, there's always something to see if you stand still and just listen and look for a while.
And I think it is very easy. I know, particularly with the lockdown, to sit at home and just not go out. Can't be bothered to put my socks and cold weather gear on, particularly with dark mornings and dark evenings. But I think it's very important to get out. I think they're recommending getting out and getting a bit of daylight and things like that, 120 minutes a week.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be that much, but there is definite health benefits, physical health benefits.
Yes, vitamin D, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really important. And so now we're working at home a lot. What I do try now to get out for a little bit at lunchtime because, like you say, it's very dark in the morning and in the evening. Sometimes I get out in the evening, but actually to try and make time, just 20 minutes or so away from the desk, really important. And of course I realise I'm very lucky to live, in the countryside as I do, so it makes it much quicker. But wherever you are, there's always signs of nature and wildlife around, isn't there?
And even in quite urban areas, you've got green spaces and things like that, and you can normally find at least a little bit of woodland or a little park. And even if you're really not that keen on the countryside, you still get benefits, whether you like it or not.
So this woodland, so we're in this woodland now, as you said, is it like a plantation on what might have been an ancient woodland?
Yeah, that's the thing, because do you know the definition of an ancient woodland?
Yes, a wood that's been in existence before 1600.
Yes.
So in my past early days of working countryside, I actually was a woodland officer for a local authority. So although it was a long time ago now, I do remember some bits of that, and I think my identification's a little bit ropey now, a little bit stale. But I try to, learn and remind myself every year. Yeah. So there's ancient woodland indicator species, which we might see in a minute, and so on, isn't there? But in this woodland, you don't get a huge amount of undergrowth, but you do get this area here is full of wild garlic. And that's sort of slightly later in spring, sort of May time, isn't it?
We're just up outside. There's a lovely big deer fence which somebody's put here to try and keep the deer out of the fields here. And there's a sign of the deer being outside here, isn't there?
Yeah, it is.
Looking down here. They're what we call deer slots.
Okay.
So, they're a bit like a cow or a pig. They've got two cleats, they're called, like two toes.
Yeah.
And you've got these little oval shapes where they're running up and down outside the fence. They're probably quite happy out here.
Yeah.
But that's certainly something you can't tend to see in the summer because you haven't got the mud to put them in.
That's right, yes. It's great to see these signs. And actually, if you just walk up here a sec, you can see where the badgers have lifted the bottom of the deer fence and they're getting through. And you can see how smooth it is as they're sort of sliding themselves under the fence.
Is there any actual badger hair on it at all?
I can't see any. Often you can't you? Because they're quite coarse and they're sort of tipped with, they're sort of brown. They're not as black as I thought they were. When you see them, they're actually sort of brown and you can often see them caught in the bottom of the fence.
Yeah, where they've gone underneath it and scraped under. But actually, if you do get one, roll them between your fingers because they're not round. They're slightly oval.
Okay.
And as long as your fingers aren't frozen,
yeah,
you can almost feel like plop, plop, plop as it rotates.
Yeah.
Like a little oval shape. So it's clearly not, well, they'll never keep the badgers out anywhere. They'll dig under anything, won't they, really?
Yeah. And they love the maize, don't they? They get into the fields and they eat all the corn.
Yeah.
On the other side of this hedge, this is a permissive bridleway, actually, that the farmers allowed people to use. It's just a fantastic resource. It goes all the way around this enormous field.
Yeah.
And in there, it's full of skylarks, which I always associate with the warmer weather.
Yeah.
Even though I think do they overwinter here now, skylarks?
They do. Some birds. I mean, clearly things like the fieldfares come here in the winter. A lot of our songbirds will disappear down to the south and France and down to Africa, like I know you do occasionally, Joe. You go to Africa quite a lot. But there are some birds that stick around.
Yeah.
And there's some that do very short level migration.
Okay.
So they might migrate down to the coast a bit.
Right.
And then hop back here again. You'll see a few skylarks. And it's a bit like when we get into the woods as well. You won't hear much song, but it might be quite dead in there. We'll have to see what it's like when we get in there. But they've all clumped together into flocks for safety. And that's essentially what these fieldfares and redwings are doing. It's quite a flock coming down from the hedge there.
Yeah, there is.
And it's like many eyes keep their eye open for the sparrowhawk. But when they come to breed, they want to disperse and defend their territory. They get stroppier with each other, so they won't really stand anybody else's presence around them.
I see.
So yeah, it's fascinating, and being around to see that change rather than just going out when it's hot and sunny and there's loads of bird song. It's trying to look and see when they start singing.
Because you really notice the difference.
Yeah. We'll see what's singing, because now we're after December and the days are lengthening.
Yeah.
Quite often that day lengthening is the trigger for these changes in behaviour. And all this twittering and tweeting is actually goldfinches.
I can see them.
Yeah, there's one there.
Yeah.
You know what a group of goldfinches is called?
Not a flock then.
A charm.
Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? A charm of goldfinches. We sort of have them in threes around the garden. They seem to go around in a little group of threes, chattering away to each other.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, because do you put bird feeders out?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so they'll come to your feeders.
Yeah.
But actually, you might see only 3 or 4 or 5 at a time.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm training to be a ringer again. But I remember ringing siskins, which are quite close related, in my mum's garden. And you'd only see 3 or 4 at a time.
Yeah.
And one winter I ringed 60.
Ah, okay. So you only ever see 3, but actually there are a lot more out there. Yeah.
They're doing a bit of a circuit, okay. So they'll come through. They won't hang around the bird food because the sparrowhawks know where the bird food is as well.
So these are poplars here, and I assumed that they'd planted them as a sort of shelter belt for the orchards that were here once.
Yeah, that would be true. Yeah, they do plant these. They like a bit of shelter belt, keep the wind off. And that makes a big difference in the spring, clearly, when they want loads of bees on the orchard. Makes it a little bit warmer, gets out the cold a little bit. but they don't. But it's not a usual thing to put in a hedgerow.
No.
So if you've got an orchard, you don't normally like things like crabapple and blackthorn. You didn't used to, because they felt it carried the same diseases that impact the orchard.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So in some places you find things like Italian alder and things that you wouldn't normally find at all in a hedgerow. So it's sort of remnant. I know the orchards have mainly gone, but it's a sign here that they did used to be here.
That's
if you,
right.
if you can read the land.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to look out for some flowers. I haven't seen many, but actually there are actual flowers on this hazel here, which is actually one of the first to come out.
I didn't know that hazel had flowers.
I know, it's this thing, they're not traditional, clearly, petal flowers and things like that you might think of as flowers. But you've got these catkins.
Yeah.
Do you know where catkin comes from?
What, the name, the
Yeah.
word catkin? No, I don't.
Apparently it's Middle Dutch,
Yeah.
and it comes from katakin, which means little cat or kitten.
All right.
Yeah, I know. And I think it looks like a little cat's tail hanging down.
Ah.
But these are just the male ones. These produce the pollen,
Yeah.
but it should have some female flowers on there. And I think Carly very nicely found one for us just now, female. I'll have to put my glasses on for this, if we can find it. Sticking out from a little bud or something. Yes,
There?
that's the thing. You know,
Just by that.
and it's like a little tiny,
Oh gosh, yeah.
looks like a little red firework sticking out.
Sort of bright pink.
Yeah, and that's the female bit.
It's tiny.
Pollen from this tree won't be able to pollinate itself. They'll be relying on the next door neighbour one, so and they're wind pollinators. There's not a lot of insects out.
No.
So these all
True.
the pollen will come out of these and drift in the wind, and then go on these little red bits, and it will stick there, and that will pollinate, and that's where the nut will be. So
Wow.
it's our first flower, isn't it?
That's first flower.
So this is a proper bit of ancient woodland. Now, I know
Yeah.
some people are coming here and think, yeah, because you were saying before about ancient woodland, it's over 400 years old. But these trees don't look 400 years old, do they?
No.
But it's the continuity of the woodland, not the trees. So the
Yeah.
trees have been cut down, and there's actually a bit of ash there.
Huge stall, isn't it?
Huge
Massive.
stall, yeah. And that's where somebody's cut it off, probably for the timber, and they'll naturally regrow again. And it looks like from the size of those bits of branches coming out, well, the trunks really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Coming out of it now.
Hasn't been cut for a long time.
50 years, 60 years maybe. But that big stall is about 2 metres wide.
It is, yeah.
So that's an old tree. It's just
Been-
young growth on it, really.
And so this woodland is carpeted in bluebells.
Yeah.
In spring, and it's got and dog's mercury and wooden anemones
Yeah.
as well. Those little very delicate, sort of pale flowers, aren't they? With
Yeah.
the little purpley veins running through them. Very beautiful, and they've sort of got their nodding heads that open up in the sun.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of my favourite spots actually, and sometimes I just go and sit and just enjoy the surroundings and the smell as well. It's quite a nice smell.
Yeah, bluebells, when you smell them together, they are quite, you can smell, I mean, even driving past with the window down, or like me with the top down, you can smell when you drive past a good bluebell wood of this waft of scent coming out of the trees.
Yeah.
And there's actually a bit of butcher's broom over here, I noticed.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
see if we can have a look at that.
So bluebells, wooden anemones, dog's mercury are sort of ancient woodland indicator plants, is that right?
That's right, yes. So they show this place has been here for centuries, really. And although they flower, they don't propagate much by seed.
They're sort of underground,
Yeah.
the root system.
The roots and the bulbs dividing. And although you occasionally get them in hedgerows, and that might be a sign actually they've cleared out the middle of the wood and left the edge of the wood as a hedgerow. But they're an indicator that wood has been there for quite a while to get that number built up. And I've sometimes, because if you've got an open field and woodland grows on it, we call it secondary woodland.
Yeah.
And I've actually been in Sussex. I was in a wood on the edge of 2 blocks where the trees looked identical. But one side had all the bluebells and everything else, and the other side didn't. And that was because that was formerly a field and things hadn't crept out into it yet.
Sure.
Yeah. So we've got butcher's broom.
So is butcher's broom an indicator ancient
yeah.
woodland acacia as well.
It's just down. Oh, it's got some berries on it as well.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's got little berries there at the moment. Again, birds love the berries, you know. But this has got funny little, I say leaf-like bits on it. These flattened bits with the spikes on it, they look like leaves,
they do look like leaves.
but they're not leaves. They're flattened bits of stem. I don't know why in
very different.
evolutionary terms they got rid of their leaves and they've now got flattened bits of stem which look like leaves. I don't know.
And is it called butcher's broom because it was used
Yeah,
as a broom in butcher shops?
well, for scrubbing the, you know, the blocks they cut all the meat on,
Yeah.
you know, that people now buy for their lovely country kitchens.
Yes.
They used to use bunches of this because you've got these little spines, they're quite sharp, aren't they?
Yeah.
To scrub the block and clean it. So that's why it's butcher's broom. It's absolutely beautiful here, isn't it? You've got the sun streaming across the field, all the grass glinting, but there's these lovely shafts of light coming into the wood itself, isn't there?
There is.
So that's a bit of dog's mercury.
There is.
Not at its best this time of year.
No, because it has like a fluorescence, is it, rather than a flower, doesn't it? It has
Yeah,
like,
they don't have much in the way of a flower. It's like it is a flower, but it hasn't got the big showy petals and things. And it's not as dominant and as lush it will be later in the year. But it's certainly still here. There's a lovely, you see that bramble leaf
yes.
with that track
yes,
on
I
it?
see it, yes.
That's either a fly or a moth laid their egg on that. And it's, rather than being on the outside of the leaf, they're inside the leaf. And they burrow through and grow as they eat. You can see it's very thin on the edge.
Yes.
And when it gets fatter as you go in,
I can see that.
so that's where it ended up as a big caterpillar inside there. Well, not big, I mean, it's clearly not massive inside a leaf. Yeah, and you're saying that it's full of bluebells, but trouble is this time of year, there's just nothing above ground, is
No,
there?
nothing, no. And then later on here again, you get the wild garlic or the ramsons
Yeah,
that comes so after the bluebells are finished, I guess. And that's lovely. I mean, it absolutely, you know, you can smell it the minute you get to the edge of the woodland.
yeah. I mean, actually, the flowers. Have you ever tried eating the flowers?
Yes, I use them quite often.
And they're peppery. They're not as garlicky as the
No.
leaves, but they're lovely tasting, aren't they?
Yeah. There's a really good recipe for scones with wild garlic and cheese that I have made
Yeah.
in lockdown.
So we've got a little pile of feathers here. So clearly something's come to a sticky end.
It has.
But it's a question of what did it. So clearly you've got a couple of predator options around here. I mean, clearly badgers, but they don't tend to catch birds too much. There's foxes, sparrowhawks, kestrels. But looking at it, because the one difference with a fox is that, particularly with, is there any wing feathers there at all? Can't see any.
None.
They tend to bite the feathers off rather than pluck them individually.
Right.
So you'll find all the bases of the feathers, particularly the flight feathers, all cut off at the base, where they
Okay.
sort of use their teeth on the side to bite them off or they move them. But this has been plucked feather by feather. That's normally a sparrowhawk. So it looks like from grey, it
And
looks
would
like
it have done that in a tree rather than on the ground?
I think because there's no feathers on these trunks and
There
stuff.
isn't.
Sometimes they'll have a plucking post they go to all the time, particularly if they're nesting. The males do most of hunting to feed the chicks until they get to a certain size. So you'll have a regular place next to the nest. I say next to it, 50 metres up to,
Okay.
you know, where he'll stop and pluck it and then pass it across the female or call her across to get it. And she'll feed the young. But I think this has been plucked on the ground where it's been caught and then it's flown off with most of the body. So although we haven't seen a sparrowhawk, it's one of these signs, isn't it, that sparrowhawk are here.
We have seen a kestrel.
Yeah, we saw a kestrel, yes.
And we saw a red kite.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Red kites are more and more regular these days, aren't they?
Yeah, we didn't used to get them sort of down this far. You'd see them a bit further up the county. But we are seeing them more and more. But of course they're mainly carrion. Do they mainly eat carrion rather than kill themselves? Is that right?
Normally, I think they might take the odd sick rabbit.
Right.
They're not quite as predatory as a buzzard or a kestrel will be. So they do rely on carrion a lot. Particularly, I mean, if you've got a pheasant shoot near you, and when they're all turned out and whenever they release them once they've grown them on, you quite often find loads of squashed pheasants all over the place. and that attracts the kites in. Of course, they're near the road, and there's a chance they'll get hit by a car as well. So, but they do love a bit of roadkill. So, having said we can't see any bluebells, there's actually some tiny little green shoots poking up there.
Carly's found these.
Carly found these. I'll try and claim them themselves, but I think Carly, she's been spotting for us. So yeah, Carly's found these ones. But they're pretty small at the moment, aren't they?
They are.
It's an amazing sign of things to come.
And now, tell me about this is obviously a native bluebell, but you do sometimes get the sort of Spanish bluebells, don't you? That people plant in their gardens. Is that right? And they're a bit different in terms of how the flowers are on the stem. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, because if you look at a bluebell, a native bluebell I'm talking about here, they're a slightly deeper blue, more purpley blue, and all the flowers. When the flower comes up, it arches over. I'm just doing hand signals here, which doesn't work well on podcast, Joe. But they arch over, and all the flowers hang down on one side, and they all hang down. The Spanish bluebell, which clearly is imported, that's more upright. It's slightly lighter blue, not as purple, and at least some of the flowers on the top will be sticking upwards. And they do hybridise as well, which doesn't help matters either, it confuses things.
Yes.
But there can be a bit of an issue with, well, bluebell's a bluebell, why does it matter? But, certainly the genetics of these are developed over time for our woodlands.
And we've talked about that being like, they're an ancient woodland indicator species, so you they therefore have a long history, don't they?
Well, absolutely, yes. And, if the Spanish bluebell dominates, then it slowly drives out the genes of the native ones. And there's a similar case with something called, do you know yellow archangel?
I do, yes. It looks a bit like a nettle, but
like
it's got yellow, like a dead nettle, but it's got yellow flowers.
Yellow flowers, that's right. And that's another ancient woodland indicator. It's quite beautiful. It's quite a complex flower. It's very difficult to describe, isn't it? But it's a bit like, if you know your garden plants, like a rosemary flower.
Yes.
It's not your typical, if you ask a child to draw a
daisy
flower,
or something,
daisy, it's just petals sticking out. It's got quite a big structure to it. But they've got quite a beautiful, complicated yellow flower. And if you know white dead nettles and red dead nettles, that same sort of flower. Well, there's a garden variety called variegated archangel.
Right.
And part of the problem is that people, they might be clearing, you've got quite a new house, you're probably tidying your garden up, and you think, well, I can just stick that over there. I know you won't, Joe, you're very well aware of this, but you think, well, it doesn't matter if a few bulbs, or they might plant the daffodils out in the woods. But it becomes a problem because things like yellow archangel, the variegated form, becomes dominant and can smother huge areas. Oh. And quite often the non-natives don't have the same amount of things that eat it, like the insects.
So it doesn't support so much wildlife, really. It doesn't support so much of our sort of insects and pollinators. Yeah,
it's partly that, but there's nothing that eats it to control it.
Oh, okay.
So it's one reason we don't like people planting odd things in odd little bits of wood and chuck it. It doesn't matter if I dump my garden waste on the edge of that woodland, does it? That's a similar problem across the world, because if you go to Australia, in New South Wales, one of the biggest problems they have out there of weeds is bramble. And there's acres and millions of acres of it, there's nothing there to eat it. And partly that was where you had naturalisation societies. So there was a aim, I think, in America, that somebody wanted to get every species of bird that was named by Shakespeare in America. So they took goldfinches and all sorts of things out there, and there was somebody, who's head of the Botanical Society in New South Wales thought it's not rich enough in Australia for us. Let's plant some brambles.
I bet he's regretting that decision.
Certainly, the Australian people are regretting it. Yes. Now I think we've just come to the edge of wood. We're out looking across an open field, but I think there's quite a special tree for you over there, isn't there, Joe?
There is, Andy. So during lockdown, I decided that because I walked here most days, that I would start taking a photo of that tree. It's a big oak tree.
Yeah.
In the middle of the field, really, and it stands, on its own, so it's quite easy to get a good photo of it. And so I took a photo every day. It was a way of making sure that I went out for a walk. And I had to try and mark the path where I was taking it from, so I took the same photo every time. And then at the end of the year, you can look back and just see how it changes all through the seasons. Not only the tree itself, but also the field surrounding it as well.
Yeah.
So
So it's
It
not
was,
compulsive obsessive at all.
Not-
but a nice project.
No, not at all. It was just a way of making sure that I got out for a walk, and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
And actually the shape tells us a lot, because it's an oak tree, but it's quite I mean, if you can imagine, if you've got a bit of broccoli,
Yes.
it's a typical broccoli shape, isn't it?
It is.
So it's grown sideways as well as up.
Yes.
So if we look at these oaks behind us, if you go in the middle of the wood, they've all grown upwards, because they're all competing for the light,
Yeah.
and they're trying to get up there as quick as possible to beat the others. But that's clearly grown in an open field,
Yeah.
because it's had room to spread, and relax out.
Yeah.
A bit,
I like that. I like those sort of wood pastures where you have those sort of standard trees and
Yeah.
in amongst the large fields. It's just a very, very bucolic landscape, isn't it?
It's beautiful, yeah. So our lovely spotter, our helper here, Carly, has again found the plant here again. These little kidney-shaped leaves, they're lesser celandine. Now I don't think we can even see any buds on them yet.
No.
But this is one of the really early ones that come out. It's really, for me, a sign of spring actually happening. And you get like, I was talking earlier about the yellow archangel not having a normal flower people draw, but this is typically a flower, like a daisy type flower with big oval petals.
And they're really sort of bright yellow and
Yeah.
really glossy as well, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And
It's
they are
quite difficult to take a photo of them because you get so much light off them. It's quite difficult to get a
It can
good
be,
photo.
yeah, and it's nothing quite like seeing it with your eyes,
No, quite
without
right.
anything in between you,
Quite right. So I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, keep your eyes open. I used to have, when I was young, a long time ago, we used to walk every Sunday to my grandparents' house along these lanes, and Granddad used to give a prize to the first child to find a primrose. So, I don't think I'm going to give you a prize if you see one for me, Joe, but,
Okay.
look out for the first celandines.
I will.
Now, we're talking about some of the signs of spring, and clearly birdsong is one of those. But we're in a bit of woodland here, and it's pretty quiet, isn't it?
It is.
That's mainly because, you might come into wood and think it's pretty dead because you can't hear much at all. And clearly one of the signs of a spring or summer woodland is loads of birdsong. But what the birds have done here now, because they don't, guarding territories, that's partly what the song's about, to feed their young from, is less important. So what they've done is they've all gathered together in a flock somewhere. And you might suddenly, in a wood like this, suddenly you're alive with birds, and there's mixed flocks with great tits, cold tits, blue tits, maybe the odd woodpecker and nuthatch, all travelling around together through the wood, not stopping long because they might get picked off by the nasty sparrowhawks again. And it's many eyes looking out for danger. But then as the days lengthen, actually birds have got a special gland in their head. I think we all have to some extent, but it's very important for birds, which detect light levels. And as the day length increases, it starts putting out different hormones. And that starts triggering that want to set up a territory and start singing again.
So it won't be long
Won't be long, no.
before we start to hear them more.
No, you will hear a few singing now.
Yeah.
And it's just, when it starts making a real difference after Christmas, when the days are really a bit more apparent length, they can time that against their internal body clocks and think, this gland thinks for them.
Yeah.
And starts putting this message out to start singing. Because about the only thing that sings right through the winter is a robin.
Oh yeah.
And that's partly because they're defending their same territory they need to feed them through the winter. Now, we talked a bit today about mindfulness, but you use that quite a lot, don't you?
I do, yes, I do. It really helps me to sort of manage my stress levels at work. And also whilst in lockdown, we recorded a whole series of podcasts as part of this series, actually. So this is the Looking After Nature series, and my element of that was the Looking After You series. So there's online you can find, I did about 16 episodes of mindfulness, really focusing on using nature and as part of your mindfulness practice. So like we said earlier, you don't really need to sit in a room and meditate or cross legs and have joss sticks going. It's much more about getting out and actually being a bit more present in nature and getting the most out of your time outside.
And doing things like looking at plants or just listening to birds, that's that focus, isn't it? It's that switching everything else off and just thinking about one thing partly, isn't it?
That's right. It's about being in the present moment, and it's not worrying about, you know, the work you've just left behind or what's going on back at home, and it's not thinking about the future. It's just really being in the here and now, and if you stand still with that experience, then you really gain the most. It sort of imprints itself in your brain.
Yeah.
So, it's really important. It's really important for me in the way that I work and the way that I cope with the level of work that we're all doing at the moment.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, thanks, Joe. It's been a lovely afternoon.
We've had fantastic sunshine, haven't we? And I've learnt so much today, Andy.
And it's been quite nice to come and see the places that are special to you.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. So we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Right, bye.
Well, Andy, that was a fantastic walk we've just been on, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and it shows how much you can see just on normal tracks around your house and little bits of wood, and how important those are to people who live in this area.
Yeah, and even though this is going to go out in February, when hopefully lots of signs of spring are actually around, we're recording this end of January, and there's still some nice signs of spring around.
Yeah, we just about saw the first of the celandines out, which is fantastic, isn't it?
Now, talking of celandines, do you want to hear my fun fact?
I always have to be ready for your fun fact.
So, there used to be a theory called the doctrine of signatures. Now, do you know what that is?
I think I've heard of it, yes. Basically, it's the old thought that if you've got a plant or something that looks like a body part, you can use it to treat that affliction.
Yes, so lesser celandines have lots of little knobbly bits all over their roots. So what do you think that was used to treat, Andy?
Well, it could be any number of things, but I mean, is there an old name for it?
The old name for it used to be pilewort.
Yeah, so wort means anything that can be used for medicine, and clearly pilewort suggests that it's used for hemorrhoid treatment.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to recommend it to anybody or try it. Looked it up, and it's another name for it is Herald of Spring.
And it certainly is the herald of spring, because we've seen a couple of flowers out today, which shows that spring is on the way.
And here's a challenge for the people listening, is go and find your own heralds of spring.
Yeah. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode of Looking After Nature. We'd love to hear from you with any comments or thoughts, or if there's anything you'd like us to discuss in future episodes, you can let us know by checking out our social media pages.
And we'd really appreciate it if you rate and review our podcast on iTunes, as this helps other people find us. For now, thanks again for listening. I'm Andy Davidson.
And I'm Carly Howard. See you next time.